stores that Singapore is famous for, all right alongside of the Singapore River, flowing out to the South China Sea. Right now, if we take a look out on the south side, you can look right the way across to the Indonesian coastline, right on the horizon. And all that shipping, they tell me Singapore is the busiest port in the world. They have to bring in all their raw materials and then, of course, ship out their manufactured goods, computer chips and all kinds of things going out. And that island, that's man-made. Desperate for space, so sand is heated up and more buildings be constructed there. So if we come a little closer, now we're going back into time. Remember, this was one of the British colonies. We have that old colonial architecture of the governor's house and government buildings. Oh, yes, and look, tied up against the Singapore River. It's one of those old bumboats. You have to take a ride in one of those. Well, it's a $5 ride. And this old bumboat used to be called bump boats because they were bumping into one another. And they were busy sailing backwards and forwards to the ships anchored in the deeper harbourage, bringing all the goods and supplies many years ago. Now, of course, with freight containers, the river's not needed anymore. And so it's being cleaned up. The shrimps and fresh fish are coming back after all that pollution's been cleared. And it's becoming a pleasure river once again. Oh, now look at those old red tile buildings. Forget for a second the dereliction and take you back in time when they were seething with humanity. Fortunately, just a few are being salvaged here and there so that the visitors in the future can get some taste of the mystery of the Orient in the past. And now we can show it to you all. The old pan tiles again, right down to the river edge. All those shops and stores and little factories and warehouses and people living above. The animals and the laundry hang out the windows. And then, of course, modern Singapore, those great sky-rise buildings sweeping right down to the river edge. What a marvellous place to live and work. Beautiful views, little fresh air movement from the river. Oh, and the trees. They may be knocking down the old and building the new, but everywhere there are trees. Thousands planted every year. There's a political campaign to green the city. And that's the tradition here. Because Thomas Stamford Raffles, he established the first botanic garden here. They say he was a frustrated botanist. There's his statue standing because this is the point that he landed. And he set up the botanic gardens here, the finest equatorial botanic gardens in the world. We'll take a look at that. Oh, that's lovely. A girl on a swing. I think it's one of the finest pieces of garden sculpture that I've seen. Set above some pretty formal bedding that you're likely to see in all kinds of parks in cities. Oh yes, and the bride and groom. There's lots of brides and grooms coming at the weekend to have their photograph taken here. We're in the Singapore Botanic Gardens. But it's not all decoration and front window display. I mean, if you look for a moment at the Avenue of Royal Palms, that takes you back in time to the old fellow Somerset Maugham and his moon and sixpence and all those travellers who went this way and took their Singapore slings in the shade of the frangipani trees. But Singapore Botanic Garden, that has a very serious message. It's been very important to us back in history and is still important to us today. Earlier this morning, I was able to catch up with the director, Dr. Tan Wee Kiat. And I asked him, what was the island like when those first travellers set foot here? What was it like when man first stepped on the island here then, Kiat?
Pretty much like, where we are here today, because we're walking through a patch of primeval tropical lowland rainforest.
So how many years will it have been like this?
Oh, millions of years, literally millions.
You're quite serious?
Sure. You can see a denizen of the age of the dinosaurs. Here is a living fossil. This fern is Angiopteris and has been growing for literally millions of years unchanged.
So how do you manage to trap in the centre of Singapore City this little island of the past?
We've been very fortunate in having a piece of about 8 acres of primeval forest that have been kept intact as sort of a living museum and living laboratory in a botanic gardens to demonstrate what it was like here before.
And what happened when man arrived then? What was his influence on it?
You can see a little bit of it encroaching here too, because you look at this shrub, this creeper with these button-like fruits. This is the gambia plant, and at one time it was grown here in a plantation. They had to fight the tigers off at that time because they were still here in the 1859s. But this gambia was harvested, and the leaves and the stems were boiled to extract tannic acid, which was then shipped over to China for tanning leather.
Well, now, just a minute, you're on about tigers and things, an absolute monster out there. I mean, are there things in here that eat and bite?
Oh, well, I think it did bite that poor cockroach. You can see the remnants of that cockroach up in that net. I think that's been quite a struggle because he's lost one of his 8 legs.
Oh, goodness. But, I mean, what about snakes? Are there snakes?
Well, the snakes here maintain the rodent population at an acceptable level, and the snakes we talk about are the python and the cobras.
You're pulling my leg.
No.
What, do you mean, it's just coming out from here? I mean, have you ever seen one here?
Yes, but they run away faster than I can run away from them.
Oh, do they?
Yes.
I'll feel a little easier, not too much about that. Now, you're talking about the tannin and the boiling of the leaves. What about the method of doing that?
Well, they chop the vines up, and they make use of the vegetation, the trees around here, to provide the firewood.
And those grow so quickly, of course, you'd have plenty of wood.
No, unfortunately not, because these hardwoods take a long time to grow. Some of the trees in this forest are over 100 years very easily.
I mean, a big tree like this one here, then.
Yes, and you can see why these trees are very desirable, not only as firewood, but also for furniture, because they have a very straight trunk or bole that's perfect for lumbering and sawing. And so if you cut down one of these trees, it takes you another 2 centuries to get something of the equivalent size.
200 years to replace them?
Yes.
And this is how they would look then, with these very clear stems
Yes.
and masses of climbers?
If you don't have these climbers, that would be the primeval look. But because of the influence of man, somebody would discover something that looks quite interesting in South America, or Zanzibar, say, and bring the vine back for cultivation in the gardens. And these plants would escape. And here they are in a brand new foreign land with no natural enemies, and they take over.
Goodness. Yeah.
They literally smother the original vegetation, and they are a real pest.
And is this a native then? Here, this lovely yellow
Well,
flower?
it's hard to call this one a pest. This heliconia
Yeah.
has beautiful, brilliant bracts and so forth from South America. And somebody probably, some time back, decided that they look nice and jungly, and that the native jungles are not very colorful. Why don't we make it even more colorful for a Tarzan-like atmosphere?
And so you'll just let those run away now, will you?
No. We are going to preserve this as authentically as possible, so we will be embarking on a program to remove some of these invaders.
So can you give me a little idea of your scientific work here now?
The Botanic Garden serves several functions. The main function is for education and research, because the education portion then provides the interface between the community, the public, educating them to the importance of these tropical forests, which is truly an endangered habitat and one of the fastest destroyed habitats in the world today.
And so are you able to exchange seedlings with other tropical botanic
This is what
gardens?
we try to do. Let me give you an idea of what our program is like here in our potting yard.
Well, now I see no sort of great commercial glass houses here.
Well, we really don't need any formal greenhouses because we live in one. That's why we can get away with some of these structures that's been here for several generations. Just need some wire netting to keep the squirrels out, 2-legged and 4.
You have 2-legged squirrels here.
Yes.
Yeah. And just a little shade.
Right.
Now, what have we got here?
Well, this is actually the hub for one of the most important roles of the Botanic Gardens. This is where we get our propagules for new material that come in and for exchange. Well, Peter, take a look at these, for instance. The palm group is one of the most important in this part of the world. So we would get fruits from our collecting trips and from exchange and grow them up into seedlings, which will be used in our palmetum and also for exchange.
And then cuttings at the back there?
There you are. That's another form of propagules that we get.
No polythene, no propagators?
You just put some rooting hormone on the tips and stick them in the sand.
Yeah. Now we're here. What are these very bright fruits then?
See, not all the fruits are that beautiful. This is iridescent. It's from one of our forest trees, and with some potential as a street planting. So
and you're looking for ornamentals that are useful?
Yes.
And what about this then? Is that the same sort of story?
Same story. This came from one of our collecting trips to into the deep forests of Malaysia. And this has a lot of potential because it's very attractive and grows in deep shade. Yeah. So we get our plants not only from our collecting trips, but also from commercial sources like this anthurium, which probably had its origins in the same fashion.
Now, what category then does this lovely iridescent green plant?
You know, it keeps that beautiful chartreuse color even in the adult form. So it was first used in Singapore as a hedge. But this actually is erythroxylum, which produces cocaine. And so we are cultivating it because of its importance in the world as a commercially viable plant for drugs.
So this is the plant which we misuse as well as using it medicinally?
Yes, indeed. Yeah. And it is our botanical role to maintain the genotype germplasm of material like this for education.
Well, now what have we got here? These look like some really weird things.
These are epiphytes, plants that grow on other plants. These are very weak climbers, you see.
But there's a little insect running about here. Is that an ant? Or?
It's part of the symbiotic relationship that makes this plant interesting. The plant is fashioned into a flower pot, which provides a home for the ant. Ants bring the nutrients right into the leaf itself. Peter, why don't you cut one of that open?
Okay, now you can see it, my fingers were itching. Yes, let me just cut that down. And so there's a hole, and the ant actually goes right down into this.
And they bring to with that all the seeds and fruits and so forth. Now that is quite a... It didn't provide, this wasn't a home chosen by the ants, unfortunately, but you do see the roots getting into it. Normally there would be a pile of leaf litter, ant seeds, the seeds brought from the forest floor, and ant droppings to provide the food for this plant.
Amazing how they live together. Oh, and we've got another symbiotic relationship here, haven't we?
Well, it's not quite symbiotic because this is actually a trap. This is a pitcher plant where the leaf tip is formed into a trap to trap insects. You see the beautiful coloration. Inside it looks like a stained glass window, and ants or other creatures will be attracted into that pitcher, and there's moisture at the bottom. And once that insect gets in, it doesn't get out.
And that's the end of him then?
It's not a swimming pool.
What is that called?
It's a Nepenthes rafflesiana, named after the founder of Singapore.
Oh, the Raffles, the rafflesiana, yes. Now, what have we got collected here?
These are some of the fruits of our plant collecting expeditions to the forests of Malaysia. And we are always evaluating the use of some of these plants. We're looking at these two dry sticks, I think.
Not much use in this, is there?
Not very attractive, but this is a very important orchid. It's a vanilla vine because the fruit of this is the source of the commercial vanilla essence.
So all of our ice creams come from this?
From a fruit of this orchid.
Yeah. And a very pretty plant you have there.
Yes, look at this iridescent sheen on that. This is a plant that grows in our darkest forest areas, the forest floor itself, so it needs very little light. And so that has enormous potential for growing in, in apartments where there's insufficient light, or hotel lobbies, because you can see it's lovely. It's a melastome.
So it may become a houseplant. But what about this? I mean, this is like a sort of whirligig.
It's a costus that grows in this beautiful spiral fashion. And we thought that it's very ornamental, and we are evaluating it and assessing its use as an ornamental plant.
And again, I suppose this
and that's,
beautiful
of
leaves.
Course, like those big shields of natives and so forth. That's an alocasia, which will do well in hotel lobbies again.
Well, and now we're into, is it bananas? I mean, this is just a fruiting plant.
That is a banana species, one of the wild species from our forest floors. And in the juvenile stage, you look at that beautiful coloration on the leaves and the dramatic maroon blotches. And even the stem itself is rather attractive.
Oh, yes, indeed, yes.
And since, again, it will take low light, we thought it could look very well in a pot, in a lobby, or in a home.
And what have we here, then?
Now, we are constantly looking for street plantings that would enliven Singapore and make it more interesting. We are now looking into the forest trees from the Malay Peninsula, and this particular tree itself is one of the beautiful timber trees, the Bornean ironwood. And it's trees like that are cut down for the lumber. And so we are now evaluating its use as a multi-use plant, not only just for lumber, but also as a street planting.
And it'll grow quite tall, presumably.
Oh yes, we hope to get it into a forest giant any century now.
And what about this then? He looks like a throwout almost.
One of our failures. When you bring in plants from the Mediterranean and try to grow it in a tropical equatorial climate, this is what you get. Some you win, some you lose.
And this is interesting, the way the leaves come in.
Isn't it? It's in beautiful tiers. It again has great potential. It's a forest giant that will grow into a beautiful street tree, but it also has another economic use. During the Second World War, source of rubber was stopped from Malaysia, and so other sources were looked for. Well, not Malaysia, from Brazil.
Yeah.
And this was a potential tree that could produce latex. Let me see whether it will. Look at that white sap that's oozing out.
Oh, I see, yes.
See, this is one of the latex plants.
But surely rubber and Malaya, they're linked, aren't they? I mean, have you got one of the true rubber trees?
The story of rubber really began in this botanic gardens. So let's go to the rubber tree monument.
Okay. Goodness, this is a great spread of water. Is this just for ornamentation, the lake?
Well, this is one of the roles of these 3 lakes that we have in the Botanic Gardens. It's pretty to look at, but it also is a water catchment area. The water tankers that water the plants growing along our city streets come to the Botanic Gardens to fill up with the water from
Can't use a hose?
Oh no, we can't make use of the potable water. It's too precious a commodity here in Singapore.
Well, now what do we have here?
We're entering a grove of young rubber trees, and we've established this here as a monument to the rubber tree industry.
Well, didn't the sort of rubber business start in Brazil?
Yes, it did. The tree, member of the spurge family, originated in Brazil, where the Indians would go into the forest and they would locate the odd tree to harvest the latex. When they found a tree, they would just slash the trunk with a machete in a relatively haphazard manner, and that may even damage the tree to the point of death.
Yeah.
But that was the way para rubber was collected. Some of these seeds were sent over to Kew Gardens.
Oh, that's the Botanic Garden in England, our Botanic Garden,
That's
yes?
correct. They raised some seedlings and sent some of these seedlings to their tropical holdings, of which the Singapore Botanic Gardens is one. 3 seedlings were very successful in growing here, being established here in the gardens, and really formed the germplasm cornerstone for all the rubber trees in this part of the world.
But I mean, did you just chop those and kill some of those as well?
No, actually what made rubber tree growing into a viable industry was the invention of a way of tapping by the very first director of the Botanic Gardens, Henry Ridley. He found that if you were to cut a herringbone design on these trees, and I'm sorry I can't show it to you now because this is afternoon and the sap really flows best in the early hours of the day.
Oh, I see, yeah.
But by doing so, you can really continue tapping these trees for a longer period of time and for a longer period of the life of the tree.
Yeah, and so when he was doing this, was there an enormous demand at that point for rubber?
No. Actually, he had to create the demand. His trees were very prolific, so we grew a lot of rubber tree saplings in this garden. But Henry would go around to the plantation owners throughout the Malay Peninsula. They were growing things like cocoa and pineapple and so forth, coffee. And he said, wait, rubber has greater potential. But nobody believed him, so like a latter-day Johnny Appleseed, he'd walk around with a pocket full of seed. Let me show you what the seed.
Oh, it's quite free seeding, is it? Yes.
Yeah. Look at these enormous fruits, huh?
I see.
3 capsules. Well, let me show. Here. Look at the latex that's oozing out of this. Yeah. That is the stuff from which you get our rubber. You know, that's the latex. Now, Henry Ridley would take some of the seeds. When this fruit is ripe, it would behave explosively and release these fruits. Okay.
Oh, I see, yeah.
And that's what Mad Henry Ridley, that's what they called him, would say, grow these seeds. And he convinced one of the major plantation owners to do so. And right about then, Henry Ford came through with this contraption of his, you know.
You mean the Model T Ford?
Yes, indeed. So there was immediately a great demand for natural rubber for the tires. So everybody started coming to the Botanic Garden saying, we want a source of rubber seed. So Henry was able to supply some of that demand because there were requests for as many as 1 million seed per day.
1 million seeds a day?
1 million seeds per day.
He must have made a fortune.
Well, it kept the gardens growing for a long time.
And so now are you looking for a new source of 1 million seeds a day plant, another commercial
Not exactly.
success?
but I make use of this to illustrate the important role of botanic gardens in the world.
Yes. Thank you very much indeed, Doctor. Magnificent place. You know, we must come back. So much to see.
I hope you will, Peter.
Well, now, this is one of the things that every good tourist has to do to take a tri-shore ride. There used to be about 3,000, but now there's just a few for special days. Thank you very much indeed, driver. And your first port of call must be this, the internationally famous Raffles Hotel. I do there. Anyone that's anyone stays here. Kings, queens, princes, generals, admirals, and of course many of the famous writers. One of the first ports of call is the Tiffin restaurant. That's where you take Victorian afternoon tea. And of course, the curry. But I think Marian's finding out some of the secrets to that.
Here we are in the beautiful palm court of the Raffles Hotel with one of Raffles' chefs, Lim Hee Hong, who's going to show us how to make a vegetable curry, the famous Tiffin curry that they're so noted for. A curry that's a little milder and suited for the Western palate. She's going to use these vegetables, eggplant, okra, potato, tomato, and egg. But the very first thing Hong had to make was a curry paste. And Hong, what were some of the ingredients that went into this?
Chili,
Chili,
coriander,
coriander,
star anise,
star anise,
turmeric,
turmeric, cloves,
cumin,
cumin, what a lot of ingredients. Cinnamon,
and peppercorn.
and peppercorns. And
Yeah.
then you mix that all with water.
Yes.
You got this wonderful, fragrant paste that smells so good. And now you can begin your curry sauce.
Okay.
Huh? Got a nice hot wok, it looks
Yeah,
like.
we have to mix hot.
Yeah.
Then we add some oil.
Add some
Cooking
oil.
oil, yeah.
Yeah. That's about a quarter of a cup.
Yeah.
That's sizzling.
Yeah, slice shallot.
Sliced shallot.
Yes. To fry it.
Say about a cup of those, huh?
Yeah, to fry it brown.
They have to get brown.
Yeah. Now we add garlic.
Mmm. That's wonderful. That's about a third of a cup of garlic. That's my kind of curry, boy. Doesn't that look wonderful? Now, this curry is going to be able to go on meat or
Yeah,
chicken or
chicken.
whatever. We're going to use vegetables.
Yeah, fish also can.
Fish, too.
Yeah.
Oh,
Then
Hong, that
add
smells good.
lemongrass.
Lemongrass.
Yeah.
Just whole like that, huh? Will that
Yeah.
break up as it cooks? Now, what next
Then we
after that?
add tomato paste.
Tomato paste.
Yes.
That's about, I'd say, 3 tablespoons of tomato paste.
Yeah.
And now, is this going to cook for a little bit?
Pardon?
How long will you cook this now?
10 minutes.
About 10
Yeah.
minutes. Stirring all the time?
Yes.
Okay. Well, about 10 minutes have gone by, and look at how this has changed.
Yeah.
The lemongrass has broken up,
Yes.
and the fragrance of that's coming
Yeah,
out, and the
coming out.
shallots and garlic are rich brown. Now what, Hong?
We have to add in the curry paste.
That looks like a good 2 cupfuls of curry
Yeah,
paste.
2
That's
cups.
beautiful. And you're going to stir this all together now?
Yeah, that's right.
And how long will this take?
About 5 minutes.
About 5 more minutes.
Yes.
Okay. Oh, that smells so good.
Yeah.
It's concentrated. What are you going to do now?
Yeah, now we have to add in the coconut milk.
I'd say what, that's about 5 cups of coconut
Yeah,
milk.
about
Look
5
at the
cups.
color of that. That's beautiful. Now, how long will this cook?
About 5 minutes.
5 minutes, and then the
Yeah.
sauce is done?
Yes.
Great. Oh, Hong, look at that boil. That looks
Yes.
terrific. And see how it's thickening.
Yeah.
Now, while the curry was cooking, Hong prepared some vegetables. She took the eggplant and the okra and she deep fat fried those. The potatoes she boiled and the eggs she boiled and the tomatoes are raw. Now these vegetables are ready to be coated with the curry sauce, right, Hong?
Yes.
Well, why don't you go right ahead? Doesn't that look beautiful? Doesn't it smells good and it tastes good, I'm sure, and it looks gorgeous. Peter, you got your napkin? We're coming up. Peter, what do you think of this? Isn't this fabulous?
Well, it's beautiful, isn't it? I mean, it's a traveler's dream.
And look at all the condiments they gave us to go with our vegetable curry.
I've got coconut here and pineapple, bananas,
chutney, and the Singapore sling, a drink invented here at Raffles Hotel in 1915. We are lucky.
I can't wait to get at it. Marian, thank you for the introduction to Tiffin curry. And really thank you to Singapore. The old and the new, tremendous contrasts, and all the people so friendly and welcoming to us. So many nations and races, all sorts of smells that we can't convey to you. It's rightly called the Garden City of Southeast Asia. If you're anywhere near, please call. You won't regret it. Cheers.
Thanks to both of you for bringing us halfway around the world for that memorable report. Next week, Jim Wilson begins gardening at the Victory Garden South, and Bob Smouth shows us how vegetable gardening is done up in Alaska. You don't want to miss those reports. That's next time on the Victory Garden.
Funding for the Victory Garden is provided by this station and by other public television stations. And by W.R. Grayson.